Good morning, good evening, folks. Thank you for joining the USIBC webinar on the proposed amendment to the Information Technology Act. We're setting up. We'll start momentarily. We will give people a little more time to join in. We have very healthy participation right now, so we'll give a few more minutes for more people to join in, and then we'll start momentarily. Good morning, good evening, folks. We're setting up. We'll start momentarily. We'll start in a few more minutes. We'll just give a few more minutes for people to join in, and we'll start in a few minutes.
Hello, Abhishek.
Hey, Lavnish. Lavnish, we're just giving people to a few more minutes to join in, and we'll start in a few minutes. Okay?
Hey,
If
Jay.
you can, yeah, if you can put yourself on mute, it's a little background. Hi, guys. We're just waiting for a few more people to join in, and then we'll start. We already have more than 50 participants, but I know there are more people joining in, so just a few more minutes. Appreciate your patience, and then we'll start. All right, so we have more than 50 people on the line. We will bring people up to speed when more people join in. But again, thank you very much, whoever has joined in today for the USIBC webinar on the proposed amendment to the Information Technology, the IT Act. By now, as you all know, that the Government of India is looking at amending the Information Technology Act. The intent for this amendment has been felt for quite some time now. This law came into effect in the year 2000 and has been amended once, but since then, as you all know, technology has moved in leaps and bounds. New technologies have been developed, which have resulted in new products and new business models. The law as it stands now needs to evolve so that it is capable of providing adequate regulation for the newer technologies. Also, a number of parallel regulations are being considered by the Government of India, such as the e-commerce policy, as you know, intermediary liability guidelines, personal data protection bill, etc., which, because of their interconnected nature with the IT Act, might require some existing sections in the Act to be amendment. Hence, for close watchers of the tech policy, which are who are present here on the call with us, This news has come as no surprise. So, to better understand the IT Act and what it deals with currently, what might change, we are starting this conversation where we have with us today two experts from Nishit Desai Associates, Gauri Gokhale and Vaibhav Parekh. Let me just introduce Gauri and Vaibhav for you, so that you know we have two experts with us. Gauri Gokhale leads the IP, technology, media and entertainment, data protection law practice at the Nishit Desai Associates firm. She has been a practicing lawyer for 24 years. Gauri has assisted several international businesses in their India entry strategy, corporate and strategic deals, litigation and arbitration in the telecom, media, and technology and pharma sector. She has also spearheaded several policy initiatives for the TMT and pharma industry, including for online content companies, gaming industry, IT industry, and also for the privacy and data protection laws. She has been consistently working on high-tech industry aspects and has been named in several legal directories, including in the Hall of Fame for TMT in Legal 500. Um, that is Gauri for you. And Vaibhav Parekh heads the US office of Nishit Desai Associates and leads the practice areas of technology, mergers and acquisitions, private equity, blockchain, and virtual currencies. Vaibhav is a trained electrical engineer. So Vaibhav's insights on technology law are sought by experts worldwide. He's very much plugged in on the latest technology trends, be it cryptocurrency, where he advises leading cryptocurrency exchanges in India, e-commerce, where he has been advising many leading Indian e-commerce companies in their operations from a legal and regulatory standpoint. Has also facilitated some of India's largest e-commerce transactions, and also startup. He has been passionately involved in setting up operations and raising finance for several startup companies in India, and also helped the government on the government startup policy. Vaibhav has been ranked as a leading lawyer in M&A practice across Asia Pacific, as well as a leading lawyer in the private equity practice by IFLR. And he has regularly been ranked in the very top of his work in the technology, media, and telecom by several chambers and partners. So, so we have, as you can see, we have two very renowned experts with us. So, with that, and without further ado, I'll just hand it over to Gauri and Vaibhav. Gauri and Vaibhav, floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So today, as was USIBC mentioned, right? So we are looking at IT Act, and we will just go through the IT Act. We will not spend too much time in what is there in the IT Act today, but we'll spend more time in what is likely or possibility where change can happen or change should happen. And the objective of this today's webinar really is one, to look from what the government may want some changes to bring in, but more importantly, what industry may want some changes to bring in. And what we would like to do is, we'll not go into details today because we have only limited time. So just introduce this subject, and so that you can start thinking, and we can take this this whole exercise as trying to see how and what we can help shape the IT Act amendment if it comes, right? With this, let's start the discussion. We have many slides here, but we will not go into all the slides. The reason is that this will actually be available for you, so this can be used as a background. So we'll not spend too much time on the history side, right? But just to give you a little bit evaluation of the IT Act. In fact, I personally was involved in when the IT Act was being drafted. We had Ministry of Commerce and Ministry of IT both doing a parallel bill, and Ministry of Commerce had roped us in, and we're helping them on this particular side. So I have some insights also on what went into drafting of IT Act, and that's not for today's discussion. But what I can tell you is that primarily in 2000, when the IT Act came into picture, the whole objective was really to facilitate digital transactions, and especially e-commerce at that point of time, primarily because there were a lot of startups who were coming up and making things digital and trying to enable e-commerce. And since there was no legal framework, government decided that, hey, we should come with an IT Act which enables digital transactions. So that was a primary objective. The secondary objective was also to cover cyber crimes. And they also, at that point of time, kind of added up on intermediary liability. And also they had a little bit mentioning on encryption and other stuff, but not much. But that was the goal in 2000. Very soon, in 2008 was the next amendment. Later on, there was, as things went by, there was a requirement of certain deficiency or certain need in IT Act. So they tried to kind of bring in CERT, which is Center for Emergency Response. That's a technical team under MIT under MATI, which tries to kind of take care on the cyber attack, and those aspects we'll cover it separately. And then there came several rules and regulations. 2008 is when the major amendment, or the only major amendment, came, where a lot of new things were brought in, including with respect to SPDI and other stuff, which came in 2011. But this was the kind of a thought process when it started coming in. This next slide. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So 2011. Okay, can we go to the earlier slide, if you don't mind? Yeah, thanks. So 2011 is when the privacy things came in, and the security thing was first brought in. This was a very important benchmark. 2015 and 16 is when a lot of new things came in. Now, key aspects here, what we need to understand is that 2008, in 2000, the electronic signature was, digital signature was very technology specific. In 2008 amendment and later on, they made it an enabling provision to permit different electronic signatures. And then 2020 is when they came up with RFP, which says that we want to see how we can get advice on IT Act amendment. Intermediary, we will talk separately. Some of this thing we'll take in detail, so I will not spend time. Can we go to the next slide, please? Can we go to the, thank you. So these are the few points what the IT Act covers today. And I was saying that it primarily started electronic signature or digital signature. Later on, it was included, electronic signature was included later on. Electronic governance, basically on how the digital contracts are formed, and it kind of gave them a base on which you can interpret Contract Act along with the IT Act for digital contracts. Similarly, you had situation on certification authority. Again, that is mainly for digital signatures. Lot of things happened in the other areas, which is with respect to both offenses, which is on the criminal side, and the civil offenses, where you had then, from adjudicating and penalty perspective, and then you had cyber appellate tribunal. And then a lot of discussion, or the most important aspect which came up, actually a lot of time was spent on intermediate liability exemption. And this is a key aspect of even what you're going to discuss today. And then again, there were changes in some of the other laws, including Evidence Act, to make electronic evidence submittable in the court of law. So this basically covers the landscape of what IT Act currently covers. I will now hand over to Gauri on the next slide, please.
Sure. Thank you, Vaibhav, for that overview. Now, I think I want to make a few points here in terms of why and to what extent we need to look at the IT Act, and what has happened over a period of time. How does it affect them in the manner in which we look at the IT Act? So I will make 3 points here. Number one is the point that Abhishek mentioned right in the beginning, that the technology has moved and probably, the government is looking at new business models, new risks that those business models bring in, and what are the legal liabilities, if at all, that those business models, should bring in. They of course have been talking about digital payment and all of that. So one is, as to what new in that context does anything needs to change in the IT Act. The second thing that has happened over a period of time is the rules that have got formed under the IT Act. So even if you see today, and I have that book handy with me. So if you see the thickness of the book, it is not because the act is that big, but because the rules that have been formed under the IT Act have just multiplied. And when you have multiplicity of the rules covering different aspects of the act, sometimes it does get complicated from a compliance and implementation as well as enforcement perspective. So the other aspect that we need to look at is whether any parts of the rules should sort of be revisited along with the sections in the act to see whether any consolidation is required. The third point I want to make is in relation to the court cases that have happened. Now, over a period of time, there are certain provisions under the IT Act that have got challenged. For example, you saw under the Shreya Singhal case, certain aspects on the freedom of speech, etc., were questioned. The provisions under the IT Act were questioned. The blocking rules were questioned. Today, after the Putteswamy case on the privacy law, some of the other sections of the IT Act are being questioned because now privacy has been recognized as a fundamental right. And when you say privacy is recognized as a fundamental right, that means any law made by the state that infringes upon the right of privacy can be questioned on that ground, because now it will otherwise violate a fundamental right of a citizen of India, right? So because of these three specific aspects, that in my mind it is very, very important to see with that lens how do we revisit the IT Act. Now the other point which is very important is that the government will have certain specific aspects that they want to bring in the IT Act, but over a period of time for various instances, and we will discuss how, we have noted that there is a need even from industry demand perspective to make certain additions or deletions in the IT Act. So we need to understand those aspects also from industry perspective, and then arrive at a balance between what the government is looking at, what the industry wants, and then where do we move from here. The second point, the last point I want to make is there are two possibilities that have been discussed. The existing IT Act gets amended holistically, or there are certain specific aspects that come out of the IT Act. For example, as Vaibhav mentioned, when you have a new PDP bill, then probably the data related provisions more from a compliance perspective will get out of the IT Act. But are there any other provisions where we believe that the subject has acquired such an importance that will require a law in itself, a new law in itself? So that of course is a discussion point, but at this stage, at least to my mind, there isn't anything specific where you really need a separate law. Whatever, whether from industry perspective and government perspective, we believe whatever things need to be changed could be managed even within the existing purview of the IT Act. And another important aspect is not every issue can be legislated. I think somewhere, even the government probably will realize over a period of time that not every issue can be legislated. So you need to create an enabling framework, and within that, the industry needs to operate. So could we go to the next slide, number 6, please? We skipped one slide. Yes. So, Vaibhav, do you want to just quickly talk about how we have seen some developments on the e-commerce side?
Thank you, Gauri. So basically, as many people who follow industry would know, that the government was keen to come out with the e-commerce policy, which was more comprehensive and covered various aspects of law. They had come out with a draft policy, and then there was a lot of industry pushback, a lot of industry feedback, and based on the feedback, they may come with maybe a new policy at some other point in time. But policies needs to be implemented under law, and some of the aspects of policies may be implemented through IT Act. So that's why we are looking at e-commerce policies in detail. Now, e-commerce policy, what came up earlier was largely data focused and has a lot of focus on FDI. Now, both data focus may go under the PDP bill. FDI may be looked at separately. But then there are other things which may be brought in here, which includes intermediary reliability, security, and some of the other aspects, right, can be brought in this particular act itself. So what we are looking at, really speaking, is looking at the e-commerce policy, identifying where the government is likely bringing change here in IT Act, or from industry perspective, and looking at it, that is there any change which industry would want government to bring for facilitating e-commerce, right? So this is the thought process which we had, and we just want everybody on the webinar today to think about it and try to see if anything we should actually point out to the government, and if anything we should prepare in case government brings certain things. But in this case, it's mainly what government will try to bring amend IT Act to enforce some of the e-commerce policy they have in mind. This is what I thought I will touch upon on e-commerce. Some of the aspects like security concerns and intermediate liability we'll discuss, in the following slides. So, and I will not discuss that. Gauri, over to you.
Sure. Now coming to the intermediary liability, I think this is one of the toughest issue that has been debated.
Can we go to the next slide, please?
Aaron? Yeah. So as we know, just let's look at a quick background when we talk about the intermediary liability. When we say liability, the real clause that was inserted in the IT Act by way of amendment was in fact a safe harbor. That means that if intermediaries follow certain due diligence principles that were later laid down in the rules, if those principles are followed, then there will not be any liability for any material that is being made available on the intermediary platform by the users, because the platforms are merely providing a technological solution for users to take their content to the other members in the general public, right? To put it very simply. However, if you really see, the definition of intermediary is pretty wide, and today, and because of that, companies that provide cloud services, companies basically provide back-end services, and the companies that provide front-end services such as social media platforms today are clubbed in the same group, right, under the IT Act. Now, over a period of time, what we have noticed is that the provision that was intended to provide a safe harbor, that means that if, as I said, if you comply with certain provisions, then you are not liable for the content that you carry on your platform. Now, slowly, not only in India, but probably in other jurisdictions as well, it is moving more towards a duty to care type of regime, essentially to say that as intermediaries, you do need to take these steps so as to sort of avoid any wrong that may be happening by use of your platform, right? So as we know, there have been a lot of discussions, debates, 2-3 important issues. One was a fake news issue, the second was security concerns issue by in various public interest litigations and the like. So ultimately now, as we know, the matter was before the Supreme Court of India, where the government gave an undertaking that they are revisiting the entire intermediary liability issue, and they were supposed to come out with the revised guidelines by end of Feb or the first week of March. That was the timeline. Of course, in between, all of us were, put in a lockdown, and, the entire schedule seems to have got shifted. But now, coming back to the point I was making, the question that arises really is that there were several questions that were unanswered as to how those will be dealt with, such as tracking the originator of the electronic record, whether the intermediary should be put under that obligation to trace the the publisher of the information. And you will find some kind of provisions under the Personal Data Protection Bill, where there is a provision inserted for social media platforms to say that, voluntarily I need to identify myself, right? So the identification issue, but that in that you saw a voluntary provision, probably again because of the privacy judgment that we had. But coming back to this, the question was whether the originator, tracing the originator, putting the provisions for mandatory blocking of or putting the filters, right, for the content. So some of these provisions were heavily debated. The reason for coming back to the again, the freedom of speech and expression, whether auto blocking may affect the speech which is not an objectionable speech. So probably what we can do, Abhishek, we had written an article on this, which you can probably send to the members on, the proposed, amendments to the intermediary guidelines. So
Absolutely.
because of all these issues today, the question arises is because there are so many unanswered questions, whether now, since the IT Act is being completely revisited, should the intermediary discussion be slightly parked and then see how the IT Act shapes up and then take a call? Because today the problem is, this is all these things that we are talking about is in a rule making power, right? There is a difference between a section in the act which has been legislated through the parliamentary mechanism versus a rule framed by a regulator by way of a delegated legislation. I know I'm being little more sort of very technical here, but there is that difference, and therefore whether, one needs to just focus on the act today is a question that the industry could probably sort of raise. The other interesting thing, in the context of OTT regulations, this is actually, where when we were doing a lot of, discussion with two ministries, which is the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting and the MeitY, over a period of time, where our firm had made a presentation on behalf of, at the behest of Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, and came out with a paper also on the overall content regulation. So today there is a difficulty that is being discussed, is that today when you have a content, now one is the intermediary platforms, which is user generated content, where you do have takedown provisions, etc., which we have put up on the slide, but you don't have specific provisions under the IT Act if an OTT platform or a curated content platform has put up a content which is really illegal content. For them to order the content to be taken down, that provision is not there. And there was a self-regulation that was, that was brought in, but still I don't believe the government, the courts are fully in tune, in the current version of the code, and therefore there has been some discussion whether there could be an amendment to the IT Act to bring in a mechanism for, to give the solution to the industry to, have a mechanism to take down content the way you have for intermediaries. I know it's a slightly different point, but I thought it is important because OTT industry has become a very major stakeholder in the Indian context, and therefore we need to take into account, this particular aspect when we are looking at the IT Act. You may go to slide 8, Aaron. Vaibhav, do you want to take this?
Thanks, Gauri. So, as I was saying that electronic signature and electronic contracts and deal signature is one of the areas which was the primary reason for IT Act to be brought in force in first place, right? At that point of time, what was permitted really was just digital signature and nothing else. That also digital signature, which had a private key and a public key, and which the certification authority had issued a certificate for that particular keys. So that is what you could use for purpose of signing a contract online. And that would be then considered to be equivalent as signature in writing. Then there was a change where they included the other electronic signatures, but they just made an enabling provision. They did not actually include it, other than the digital signatures and other e-sign, which are valid digital signatures. But there are a lot of other signatures which have now become popular, and then you can look at it from perspective of whether that should be considered to be a signature or not, right? For example, you have DocuSign, you have Adobe Sign, and some of those areas where people in rest of the world use for signing a contract. The question really is that would that be a legal signature in India? Would a document signed using DocuSign be considered to be a contract? Again, under contract law, not everything is required to be in writing. So, sometimes it is just that you agree to a particular contract is good enough. So in many cases, things like DocuSign or methods of DocuSign or some other method is also a valid contract. But if you want to bring the same legal effect as a written signature, then there is a need for electronic contract, the IT Act, to specifically provide for recognition of certain signatures. So this is the other thing which we need to think about, of what changes we need to bring in the digital signature aspect, where we can now look at it saying that, hey, almost 20 years have gone by, and there are other ways of doing electronic signature which are quite common and has enough clarity that they can actually be have that authenticity which a digital signature has, and as a result we can use it to kind of recognize them as part of electronic signature and give them the same weightage as a written signature. So that is something which is a thought process. Similarly, as I was saying, that ClickWrap contract or BrowserWrap contract agreements, right, are again valid generally speaking, because under the Contract Act, but because everything is not required to be in writing. But still, if you want to give the same validity as written contract, then this is something which is a chance where we can think of what we can add to make ClickWrap and BrowserWrap agreements to have the same validity for purpose of as a written contract is. Again, similarly, there are certain regulations or laws which require agreements to be signed, and when they require to be signed, ClickWrap or BrowserWrap agreement may not work, because a click through or just simply opening a particular packet is not signature under IT Act. So going back to the signature aspect, what I mentioned, we need to try to see if anything we can add which will enhance the enforceability of these contracts. Lastly, we can also talk about stamp duty. Till recently, e-contracts were not subject to stamp duty. However, lately, the state laws of India have started amending, and they started including e-contracts as part of something where you need to stamp. And if it requires to be stamped, unfortunately, the nature of the stamp duty law is such that the stamps are required to be affixed on the paper, and the very fact that you have e-contracts means there is no paper, and if there is no paper, how do you affix stamp duty? So this is something which definitely requires a clarification on applicability of stamp duty on e-contracts, and to the extent there's an applicability, we need to have a provision of how e-stamping of e-contracts can be done. I think these are the key aspects when it comes to electronic contracts and signature. We need to start thinking about and see when the amendment comes in, what we need to bring it in. But I just thought I will lay it down for people to think. Gauri, over to you.
Sure. I think, it may appear to be a small point, but at the moment when we are in a COVID situation, several transactions are getting stuck because of inability under the IT Act to do certain things in a certain way. That's the reason we thought we should bring it up, as we are seeing, several deficiencies for contracting parties to conclude contracts in this lockdown situation. Yeah. So Can we move to the next slide, Darren? Yeah. So quickly, I don't think we need to spend time here on the data part, as we all know that the data protection bill is already in the before the parliamentary committee. However, just a quick note which we have to be mindful of, that when the industry was sort of discussing the data protection bill in the earlier avatar that we had seen in 2018, there were several provisions which dealt with the with criminal liability in case of violation of the provisions of the bill. And there was a heavy pushback from the industry that the data protection bill should not impose criminal liability, and the IT Act is sufficient to deal with the with that particular aspect, because there are the relevant offenses are already under the IT Act. So we just have to be mindful of this fact, and therefore there is a possibility that that this particular aspect is picked up, and whatever was not necessarily continued in the data protection bill, whether that may be considered for the purpose of the IT Act amendment to bring in newer offenses with respect to data. There are already several offenses with respect to data hacking and all of that, but maybe a good time to revisit them to see whether there are any newer ways in which one can commit offense have been sort of have come to play, and whether the IT Act needs to be amended in that context. Non-personal data, I think that has been another issue in the in terms of the discussion. There is a committee that has been set up to look at non-personal data. When we say non-personal data, the definition is yet not known. What the committee means by that, we all are hoping that they are talking about only anonymized data sets, but even if in case of anonymized data sets, there was a discussion about mandatory sharing of the data with the government, which we saw in the PDP bill, the new avatar of 2019 PDP bill. We did see one provision being inserted in that. Now we need to see whether the joint parliamentary committee, what is the approach of the joint parliamentary committee. But having said that, we don't believe the IT Act is the right place necessarily to deal with that, but there is a possibility of a discussion coming up, so we should be ready with that in terms of the approach that the industry should adopt. Could we go to the next slide, Aaron?
Gauri, just before that, we are seeing some questions coming in. So Naveen and Rishi, we have seen your questions, and we'll take those questions just in the next few minutes once Gauri and Weber finish.
Sure, I think we'll have just a couple of more slides. We'll be done in 4-5 minutes. Then we can take the question.
Yep. Go ahead, Gauri.
Yeah. So next point is with respect to cybersecurity and on encryption side, we'll take separately. Cybersecurity is the other area where we need to start thinking, because a lot has changed in the last 20 years when the law was drafted versus what we see now, right? So first approach, we need to look at it whether is from perspective of cybersecurity, should we have a comprehensive law under IT Act, or you should have a separate sectorial laws, right? If you really look at, we have a separate law on encryption by Reserve Bank of India, and on security standard by Reserve Bank of India for financial transaction and payment systems. We have a separate thing for telecommunication. So we have several other area sector specific, which are also coming up, giving their own standards and their own compliance required for that particular sector. On the other hand, here IT Act can look at it more comprehensively. So that's the thought process we need to have, right? Is it something which is should IT Act override the other sector regulations, or should every sector be open to come with their own guidelines and regulations? So I think this is one thing to think about. In our view, sectoral regulations or sectoral experts can actually or should be able to come up with laws, but there should be some base under IT Act which should be mandatory for everyone to follow, and then anyone comes up with any additional law, from the sector regulator comes with any additional law, that has to be on top of the IT Act, or so there is at least some common base which everybody is involved with, and then it doesn't happen that each sector comes with a different regulation which kind of conflict with the other what other law provides. So that is the third process which we need to do. Then on cybersecurity, we feel that there is a third process to be brought in, whether IT Act should be amended to bring in certain defense requirements. So for example, when you take right to life, right? If somebody is coming to kill you, then you have an ability to defend yourself. And in that defense, if you harm the other person, that's not considered to be a criminal offense by your part, right? So, if you go and even kill a person in self-defense, or you maim a person in a self-defense, right? It is considered to be a valid defense under Indian Penal Code. Now the question really is, if cyber attack happens, can I do certain things which will harm the cyber attacker, right? For example, can I put a malicious piece of code in my computer, which along with the data he takes it up, which will mess up his computer systems and situation, right? So will that be legal, or it would mean that he has violated law, but by putting a malicious code which he took from my computer, even I violated law. So whether that kind of ability to have defense, what we call it offensive defense, which means if somebody comes to attack me, I go and attack that person, will that be not considered to be defense under IT Act, and will I be liable to? Will I be say that, hey, I breached the law, right? So whether we should be able to provide those kind of provisions in the IT Act, which says that, hey, if I, for the purpose of securing my network, if I go and attack someone who's attacked me, then that won't be considered to be a violation of a law, right? So whether those kind of provisions, we need to bring it in. Similarly, whether there should be any safe harbor provisions, right, for cybersecurity victims. Now, I may be a victim, and through my computer, they may go and hack someone else's computer, or through my computer, a lot of data is taken away, where I can be liable, right? So there are a lot of situations, if I get attacked, I may be exposed to liability of third parties. So whether there should be any safe harbor provisions which says that, hey, if you've done this minimum standards, if you're met with minimum guidance, then you will not be liable, somewhat similar to what intermediary liability is talking about. So whether anything like that should be brought in. So just a thought process to have. And then, of course, we have reporting and disclosure obligations already. So under IT Act today, currently, if there is any cyber attack, you have an obligation to report to CERT, and CERT takes it up and investigates and analyzes it. So you already have that disclosure obligations. The question really is, what you need to think is, should there be any change? Is it something which we are happy with? Is there any requirement to change it, to add certain details into it, or kind of remove certain details into it? Is anyone facing any problem which we need to take it up? So this was a thought process on cybersecurity. We don't see, other than for clients, we don't see too many clauses focused on cybersecurity here, and this is a time to think of what do we need to add up in the IT Act for strengthening our cybersecurity system. Regina. Next slide, please. Gauri, over to you.
Sure. Coming to now, the surveillance, as I said earlier, some of these provisions after the privacy legislation in terms of surveillance, monitoring, etc. after the privacy ruling of the Supreme Court are under under review by at the court level. You already have seen some of the encryption related issues being debated, where the courts have had to revisit to see that whether the provisions whether there is a mandatory decryption requirement on behalf of the intermediaries, or is it only supporting the government to help them decrypt the data. So all these questions are being debated. So as I said before, we need to test the principles laid down under the Puttaswamy case on the recognition of privacy as a fundamental right, revisit with a fresh perspective some of these provisions and see what are the points that are required to be strengthened to maintain a balance between security requirements, because Puttaswamy does also recognize the fact that there will be security issues that will need to be addressed, and the balance will have to be maintained, that it cannot be overarching. And that is the reason, even in the Aadhaar case, as you know, under the Aadhaar case, the government felt that mandatory Aadhaar for certain specific requirements was going beyond the requirement in terms of security. So ultimately, the test will be for the security of the state, for security of the citizens. What are the minimum requirements in terms of breach of privacy, if at all, and whether the Act has provided appropriate balancing features so that the privacy is upheld. So in that context, it is important for the industry to look at more in a in a dispassionate manner, keeping the security aspect in the front, and then see what is it that can be given as a solution, where the surveillance and monitoring by the government, or access to information of by the government, those provisions don't breach the privacy, but at the same time, where required, the government does have access to information to maintain the security of the state. This is going to be one of the key aspects which will be debated in my mind. So we have to be ready with the thought process, with complete judicial backing, and provide solution to the government. I think encryption is the next slide, which I think, Vaibhav, you have already dealt with briefly. I know we are running out of time, but is there anything additional you want to talk on encryption?
Yeah, I think I dealt with briefly, and maybe we can just pass on to the next slide. But I just wanted to say one thing. Again, there is no major standard given under encryption under any law. Sectorials have come with their own standard which they need to apply, but there is no general standard available. And to some extent, till very few years ago, it was actually clashing with the maximum standard which the telecom department used to give. So there is a need basically for encryption related law coming in, and this is the right place to bring in. So this is what we need to talk about, but I don't think we should spend more time on it, Gauri. We can go to the next slide.
Sure. The next slide is basically an industry demand that we have seen in last several years, coming more from a media and entertainment and software industry, is the issue about digital piracy that they have been facing on the internet. There have been several measures taken, and I have listed down some of them on the slide. I will not spend time here. But even under the e-commerce policy, there were suggestions mentioned on for prevention of the piracy issue. So this is definitely where the government also is in sync with the industry, that certain steps definitely will have to be taken. The steps today that are available, unfortunately, are only by getting the court orders, and that is where the industry is facing the trouble of constantly moving the court for seeking the blockage of these pirated websites, because the IT Act doesn't provide the because of the constitutional issues, they do not have the power to directly block. The MeitY doesn't have the power to directly block the pirated websites, because the copyright violation does not come within Article 19.2, and therefore there is no provision under the IT Act for direct blocking. However, there has been a discussion where one can sort of bring about an administrative mechanism, and the Delhi High Court also had discussed this, that there should be an administrative mechanism to bring about quick blocking of the pirated websites. So there are two possibilities, whether there is an amendment to the IT Act or the Copyright Act, or maybe both. So that has been a demand for last couple of years, but this may be a good time for the M&E industry to sort of come up with some ideas and provide solutions to the government, which in my mind the government will be more than happy to look at and bring that kind of an amendment to either of the legislations. So Abhishek, we will stop here. What we have tried to do is generally with our experience and whatever we hear from the industry and general reports, we have compiled these subjects. There may be many more, but we have tried to bring in the subjects which, as I said before, both from the industry perspective and government perspective, and then we can decide where we want to focus in our initiatives, which are the key areas where we need to have industry debates and brainstorming. So over to
Perfect.
you, Abhishek.
Thank you very much, both. Thank you very much, Gauri and Weber, for this very, very insightful and deep down uh, discussion of what can be and what the experts are thinking may be the proposed amendments coming to us in the next few weeks and months when the government thinks about amending the IT Act. Again, for everybody's just for everybody's benefit, this today's webinar, we are looking at today's webinar just as a sensitizing session for everybody, so that once we start creating our policy positions for engaging with the government in the near future, as USIBC, we know what we are talking about and we are clear on what could be the proposed amendment, so that we have our policy positions all firmed up when we go and talk to the government. So today's webinar is the first step towards our continued engagement with the government of India on this proposed amendment to the IT Act. With that, we have a few questions on the chat box. If anybody has any questions right now, please feel free to speak up or type in the chat box. I'll start with the first question which we have already received. One is a question from Rishi Sharma for the e-commerce and contracts, and that's for Weber. Weber, will a mere exchange of Word version absent physical and digital signing of an agreement between the parties in Maharashtra attract payment of stamp duty?
So stamp duty actually is on legal instrument, right? So unless there's a legal instrument, it's a verbal contract, there is no stamp duty implication, right? For legal instrument to actually be valid, right, it may or may not require a signature, but if it requires signature, then it definitely becomes a legal instrument for
Right. So
stamp
I
duty.
think, yeah. So essentially, just to add, just to clarify also, essentially the execution is the trigger for stamping. So if you are simply exchanging the Word version in terms to say these are our terms of contract without actual execution, one can argue that without execution there is no trigger for stamp. But of course, that contract, just to give an example, if it's an assignment of copyright, there is a legal requirement to have a signature, in which case this doesn't work. So it's not that straightforward answer to the question, but we have just tried to simplify it to the extent we can.
Okay, well, hope Rishi, this answers your question. And then if you have any more, we can reach out to Gauri and Vaibhav directly. The other question is from Naveen, and Gauri, you have already answered it on the chat box, but for everybody else's benefit, the question is, will the parallel committee discussion on community data currently underway will wait for the PDP 2020 or the revised IT Act? So Gauri, if you can
Yeah,
explain
sure.
for everybody's benefit here. Yeah.
Sure. So the quick answer to that is the committee may still come out with its report, but because in my mind the committee is not going to suggest a law per se. That's what I believe from the reference terms. It will come up with the suggestions in the first place, and thereafter the discussion will be whether there needs to be a law. So the only short point, the difficulty today is section 92, which has already been brought in under the IT Act. I think 91 or 92, sorry, under the PDP bill. I think the question is whether that should continue in that, and the answer to that in my mind is that should come out of the purview of the PDP bill, because till such time, the exact ambit of the community data has been debated, discussed with the industry. One should not directly put a provision under the PDP bill. So if
Right.
that has been taken out and a separate discussion continued, that is the ideal position.
Okay. All right. Going to the next question from Saloni Chawla. Any idea by when will the government be notifying the IL guidelines amendment rules? Last we heard in March, it was in its final stages to notify the same by
That's
April.
right. I mean, honestly, now we need to see whether they wait, till the RFP and all of that for, the IT amendment is discussed. but the idea was they were supposed to present it before the Supreme Court end of March. Honestly, now, it's anybody's guess as to when they are in a position to finalize it. And, but what we hear is maybe, they were in the process of putting it before the Supreme Court when we went into a lockdown. So I believe the rush for, meeting the Supreme Court deadline is no longer there probably, but you never know. They may simply come out with it because they do have the mandate to issue those guidelines. There is nothing which stops them from currently going ahead and issuing them.
Right. Okay. Naveen, you have a question on encryption. Go ahead and unmute yourself and go ahead, ask.
Sure. Thank you, Abhishek, and thank you, Gauri and Weber, for your excellent presentation. That certainly gives certainly a preliminary view of what lies ahead. My question on the encryption is that the current unified licenses does not prescribe any limit of 40-bit or 56, and it says that encryption will be as per the IT Act. Now, IT Act also does not prescribe any specific limit, but if we take refuge in the October 2009 amendment to the IT Act, it simply says that so long as you are able to provide reasonable assistance in form of decryption or handling over the keys, this should be fine. So is it fair to conclude in your assessment that there will not be any encryption policy henceforth? Because 2015-16 had some back and forth, and then there was a questionnaire released by the government, and we never saw any draft coming out. So with this 2009, I don't think there is any need for an encryption policy. Appreciate your views.
Yeah, so so it really depends on that, right? So as you rightly said, initially there was a limit on 40-bit, which means that you can't do more than 40-bit on the encryption, right? So government was looking more from security perspective. There is somebody use encryption and then they use it, and I want to go and look at that message because it affects the security aspect, right? Then what can I do? Now that is what has been kind of government has tried to address it. Partly by putting it saying that as long as there is a key which is available, then there's no limit on encryption, and as long as the key is available, that's good enough, right? Though in many situations, especially cross-border situation, when you look at some of the cases in social media which are going on, where they use end-to-end encryption, this doesn't work. So government will still need to think on from that perspective how they can handle this situation, because it's one thing to go and ask somebody in India to say, hey, hand over encryption key, but when it is global in nature, how will they manage it? So would there be certain thought processes the government would want to do? The answer is yes, government would want to do certain thought process in seeing how they can handle situations from national security perspective when certain messages which are being encrypted, which government is interested in decrypting and getting idea of what exactly is there, who is the originator of the message, and how this whole thing goes, right? So that's something that they are keen to know. Again, it's not just for national security, but even for fake news and some of the other areas, this becomes important. Now, the second aspect of encryption is from protection of personal information, right? Now, here where a lot of sectorials have come with minimum guidelines, right? Minimum encryption guidelines, 128-bit and some of the other parameters which you need to use for purpose of encrypting. Now, this is the other area where IT Act can play a role of what kind of minimum guidelines we need to have. Should it be just sector specific, or should it be mandatory for everyone in other sectors? Because sector regulator can only cover very little players in the business, and the leak can happen in many other places, right? So is this something which we need from government perspective or from industry perspective? There is a need to prescribe minimum standards on encryption. So these are the thoughts from both the sides, and I think there is a need for industry as well as government to think through on how to address some of these issues from national security perspective, and then balance it with the private security perspective from encryption perspective.
Okay. Thank you, Vaibhav. That's helpful.
So we are running out of time, but we have two more questions. So just very quickly, Vaibhav and Gauri, there's the one question says, will the IT Act have provisions for financial fraud, especially in the events of funds siphoning. And then the other is just so that we can quickly wrap up. The other is, could you please share your views on how the number of users will be calculated for the purpose of proposed amendment under Rule 3rd, 7th of IAL guidelines?
Maybe I will take the first question, Gauri. You can take the second question.
Yeah.
I think on financial fraud specifically, if there is something which deals with phishing or hacking, it will be covered, but not all financial frauds will be covered. IT Act at the end of the day only covers something which has to do with information technology, and only some parts of financial frauds are covered under using technology. So that aspect definitely will be covered, and we already have ability to do it, but not everything.
Yeah, the others will be handled, relevant IPC, etc., Indian Penal Code, etc.
Yeah,
So
by CIFO and a lot of other things.
Yeah, a combination of both. So to take your other question, which is a tricky question on the number of users, I really hope that they drop this provision in the first place of localization, because it does create some of the other issues as well. But I don't believe the government also may have a solution on the number of users. For example, because when you have registered users, you focus on that, or you focus on active users, because that is the real standard that the industry looks at. So honestly, there is no visibility on how the number will be calculated. But personally, I feel this provision itself should be dropped, in the revised guidelines.
Okay. All right. Well, we are short on time. We are already over our time. So thank you very much, everybody joining in, and thank you very much, Gauri and Vaibhav. As I mentioned earlier, that this is the first step in our engagement with the Government of India. Today's session was supposed to be a sensitization session, so that we are able to firm up our policy positions, and when we start drafting our letters and do our engagement with the Government of India, we have our policy positions confirmed and firmed up. So we will be reaching out to you, to all our members, to seek your guidance and seek your thoughts and suggestions on how and what all we need to start thinking on when we start engaging with the government. But just please consider this this webinar as a deep dive sensitization and analysis for our continued engagement going forward. So with that, thank you very much, Vaibhav, and thank you very much, Gauri, for your analysis today. It was really helpful. I learned a lot today, and I'm sure a lot of our members also did so. So thank you very much. If anybody needs any more feedback, if anyone has any questions, Gauri's and Vaibhav's emails are on the screen in front of you. We have already circulated this deck to everybody who registered. We will again, if you want, reach out to us. We will send you the presentation, and you can reach out to Gauri and Vaibhav directly if you have any clarifications. With that, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for organizing this. We will
thanks a lot, Abhishek.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Abhishek. Thanks, USIBC team.
Thank you. Bye.